Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. I am Anuj Mengi, Community and Marketing Manager at Analytics Vidya. We invite you to today's webinar, which is on careers in AI. As we all know, AI has an application in almost every industry today, and today's webinar is focused on what kind of career roles are there, what are industry expansion, and rest of the stuff. And we invite today Mr. Mrinal Chakraborty and Harish Subramanian to guide you through what are the career opportunities in AI. So I'll briefly explain you uh, who they are. Mrinal Chakraborty is an AI consultant at Microsoft. He has over 10 years of work experience and is an expert in programming languages like R, Python, Pig, SAS. He has previously worked as a senior data scientist at TCS in various finance roles at UBS Investment Bank. And he is an alumni of ISB Business Analytics program. And the other speaker we have is Harish Subramanian. He's from Great Learning. He is the growth and new product development. Uh, he looks for the growth and new product development at Great Learning, Bangalore. He has experience in growth strategy field, worked in organizations like African Leadership Network, BCG, Murex. He is an alumni of Kellogg School of Management and University of Texas. Right. So I'll hand over the webinar to Mr. Mrinal. Right. So, hello, Mr. Mrinal. I'm audible. Your audio is mute. Just unmute it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, sure.
Okay, so I'll share my screen and I think I should be up and running with this, right?
Right.
Okay,
So
let me share
I'll
my.
hand over the webinar. It's
Sure.
over to you, Mr. Mrinal.
Thank you, Anuj.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for introducing me, Anuj, and welcome Harish to the panel. It's been a great privilege to talk to new talent, interact with new talent, and having Harish on board and Anuj to assist us. It is indeed a pleasure to be on board for such a webinar and talk about the exciting opportunities around AI. So Anuj has already
Indeed a pleasure to be on board for
so it's been Anuj has I thank very much to Anuj for introducing me to the panel and to the all the participants in all. But a little introduction, and then I think we should be moving ahead as to what I would like to get done in the next 30-35 minutes. And to open up the sector of AI and ML and the opportunities around that for all the aspirants around us. So I hope everybody is able to see my screen. Any issues at that? Any issues or concerns around seeing my screen? Anuj, you're fine. Can you see my screen?
Mr. Mrinal, so just I'll brief you. There is a chat option and question and answers option on the bottom of the screen, right?
Okay. On the top of the screen, rather. Yeah.
Okay, on the top.
Okay.
So there are some queries in the chat section. Just click on that. People.
Not yet. I don't have any open questions as yet.
Okay, not questions. Chat in the chat section.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are attendees. Yeah, I see attendees and I see these. I don't see any active chats waiting for me.
You can just do all attendees and
Yes, I'm seeing around 47 attendees.
right. So they are requesting you to be just adjust your webcam so that yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
is this fine? Are you all able to see my screen, which is more important? Uh,
Right.
Anuj, you have,
Yeah,
can
I
you
know.
see my screen properly?
Right.
Okay, good.
Oh,
So I think we can get started. So Anuj has already done my introduction. So, but just one line of where I'm coming from and what platform I'm speaking from would be highly contextual. So I am basically a cloud solution architect. I architect advanced AI and machine learning cloud enterprise-wide solutions for my customers, which actually needs me to be certified for most of these technologies around there. Um, what I love about my job is that it is a learning. Every day you get to learn so much from your colleagues, so much from your customers, and that is the essence of this industry. How well do you learn, and how faster do you gravitate from positions of what you don't know to positions of what you're eager to know. So thank you, Anuj. So let me dive right into this, and then let's explore some of the opportunities. So my uh, presentation will be a little different because I usually don't put my opinion and put across this as the opinion. I rather collaborate from opinion of the business leaders, and I then reinforce my experience on of what they have felt and what they are speaking in the industry. So I reinforce it with my experience, with what I see on the field, what we do on the ground, and as to what is the sentiment we get to honor from our clients. So that is where I'm coming from. So regarding opportunities, I think it's best to look at first some of the things which we are reading very frequently in newspapers. So AI, machine learning, cloud computing have uh, passed from the reminiscence of their creators and the silver labinets of Stanford and the Oxford and the Cambridge universities. They are now being talked freely around the media, and the repercussions and the impact they make to our lives is so rampant that we are now hearing, talking, and reading them about in a commonplace, as commonplace as newspapers that we read every day. So let's look at some of the ways in which leaders are comprehending this and how opportunities are shaping up around this. So my first reference around this was the article from Dilpreet Singh. Dilpreet Singh happens to be the VP HR and HR head of IBM India and Southeast Asia. He heads the HR for the digital function, and definitely around a couple of thousand people reporting into him and spearheading this particular function. I happened to chat with him on some of the seminars which I represent Microsoft around the DI, deep learning and AI and machine learning. But I was very delighted to hear him to write about this. He says on the second paragraph, if you really make a notice, you can really Google out this article. I've put the link out here, and I would rather like to go this way. He says the nature of work is evolving, and that is why so many technology related jobs are very hard to fill. Uh, as industries from manufacturing to agriculture are reshaped by data science and cloud computing. Now, please mark the word. We are referring to reshaping the whole industry by data science and AI. So are they not influencing? But yes, they have moved beyond influencing. They are reshaping the complete outlook and the way they are doing business. Just let's take one example of what I have been doing with one of my clients, which I can publicly speak of. uh, Bayer Crop Science was one uh, traditional legacy company, 150 years old of legacy of selling farm related products like fertilizers, pesticides, crop enhancers, things like these. For 150 years of its existence, never did it could connect directly to farmers for any particular advisory or any particular estimation of what the uptake of the chemicals is. But we happened to work with them and got to a place where we could implement data science in such a natural way. The farmer takes a picture of the diseased crop, and from his mobile phone he uploads a particular picture. The picture goes to is sent over a REST API and goes into an uh, deployment version of a DI algorithm, the one which is very on the top bottom corner, a deep learning algorithm. And the picture identifies or classifies, the deep learning algorithm classifies the um, nature of the particular disease, and the farmer is recommended with a particular pesticide or a particular fertilizer or where he can get it. So for never before in the history of Bayer could the company directly understand what the farmer's problems are. The farmer in turn is very happy since he is receiving advice from a technical expert and from an algorithm, and it creates a win-win situation because now for the first time I can actually estimate what will be my uptake of my products. So this is getting reshaped, and the industries like right from agriculture to engineering and to manufacturing are very deeply getting reshaped, and this opens up opportunities for people who have skills around AI, machine learning, and cloud computing, and the holy trinity of these three things. If you read through this article, you will get to understand that how it is the onus of corporations to leverage this digital wave and get their staff in place and help people move towards these particular roles, because that is where business is moving. Um, Let me take one more instance of where we are seeing an immense of data science opportunities. Uh, I am very sure most of you are aware of Andrew Ng. Andrew Ng was the founder of the Google Brain team, which comes out with the most advanced analytics offerings from Google. He is also a principal founder of principal proponent of the Stanford machine learning class, and he also is the co-founder of Coursera. And in his opinion, AI machine learning is going to be the next electricity for us. Uh, as electricity has transformed our lives over the last 100 years, so will AI and machine learning and cloud computing is destined to do this. Um, I am very honored to look at his article to a greater extent, and he says about the opportunities it presents itself for people. He says it's no longer it's people who want to do this no longer have to follow a traditional way of learning, but need to be situationally ready to pick up opportunities. Now, what do I mean by situationally ready? Yeah, it essentially means that you understand a level 300 of cloud, you understand a level 300 of what a streaming opportunity is, you understand a level 300 to 400 of how do I look at processing a terabyte of information over a server class programming environment like R, Spark R, or PySpark, and how do I get to be more relevant in processing this data to get relevant insights? And the rewards, what are the rewards for these people who are getting situationally relevant? The rewards are that the MNCs are hiring them and picking them up in lots. The traditional, if I really want to go to this particular article, I am not sure if you're seeing this article. Are you able to see the screen which shows a web page? um, are everybody able to see a page which shows a web page? No? Yes? No? Okay, I assume it's Okay, I stick to my PowerPoint in that case so that I still get the context. So the traditional high performance in the IT industries are getting a rise of around single digits, whereas the people with situationally ready skills around the digital era, the digital skills are getting a rise of double digit around 15%. So the industry is very encouraging for people who are taking the stride, getting to understand these skills and getting themselves readying themselves for the digital era. And the opportunities are just about so rewarding that you are not even you don't even have to trust me. You will have industry leaders. You have um, newspapers and articles fostering my opinion that so many opportunities are getting rewarded for people who are getting situationally ready to help their organizations ride this wave of digitization over AI and cloud computing. You will have places like Hyderabad and Bangalore reaping up most of these opportunities because of high sorry because of high presence of allied technologies and high ecosystem of training and leveraging the counterpart and the peer education, which is highly diversified in these places. And you will see Hyderabad and Bangalore becoming the real fulcrum around how this is getting powered and how this is getting moved as an industry by itself. Um, if you really look at this and look at career tracks, which I can really look as to where you could look at channelizing your new learning around AI and around machine learning, you will find that you have umpteen streams where you can start being productive in your AI teams. You will find you could actually diverse if you are very good at machine learning. You could actually, if you're very good at programming, I'm sorry, you could diversify into machine learning. You could be one sort of expert who will be considered as to which algorithm fits the best for a particular data set or in a particular situation. I also find people of big data expertise working in my team. They are usually the people who look at giving me advice on after we have sorted about the particular architecture as to which is the best kind of architecture which could be productionized for this deep learning production level deployment of enterprise wide deep learning algorithms. I also have people in my team who specialize in creating fantastic dashboards on the BI and reporting perspective, which helps decision makers to back the decisions with data. Um, in my team, I do the machine learning over a server class computing environment like Microsoft R server or PySpark, and then this information is getting relayed onto a specialized visual analytics tool like Tableau or Power BI, where I actually see the forecasting coming in on a real time. I actually can feel what is the impact of a particular hedge that I'm taking regarding supply of certain materials, or what is the impact of in dollar terms, which will impact me if my all supplies get delayed by even as little as 2 hours. So overall, we are having this AI and machine learning platform offers you not one but multiple streams where you can start leveraging and start helping your organizations to grow. Usually what I see is like me, I am an architect who also specializes in writing machine learning algorithms. Like most of industry associates like me, they possess one primary skill, and then they are expected to have about 2 to 3 tertiary skills which they get into. My suggestion for all the aspirants will be to develop one primary skill around this, whatever interests you, whether it is big data or machine learning or AI, and then complement it with a secondary skill set, be it visual analytics, be it big data, or any of these, so that you get to play and you get to contribute in more than one capacity on any of the particular projects that you're going to start working on. Um, the essence being that we are no longer as Indian contributors, we are no longer relegated to be only programmers and only be developing in IT skills. We are expected in a global performance platform to be analytics leaders. This entails us not to just write programs, but to think programming, to propose options, to go deeper into the domain, to understand data science, and to propose and propagate solutions which understands customers paradigm and perspectives. So this is a real transformation which we are looking at our IT forces, that apart from being just told what to do, as an analytics thinker you are expected to not just have IT skills, the data science skills and the business skills that you acquire with a reputed training partner like Great Lakes should be able to help you move to the business leader quadrant, to the analytics leader quadrant. And please mark my words, leader here is not somebody who has a following of 150 people reporting into him. An analytics leader is one who can articulate a problem independently, put through the solutions by himself, come out with various options, can discuss these options in detail with the client, and can satisfy the client with his business requirements. That, in my opinion, is somebody who can talk this through independently with the help of his colleagues on an advisory note, is actually a business leader in his own standing in his organization. So I would really suggest you to start taking up the leadership view of analytics and um, move forward from just programming to an advisory, consulting, and a thought leadership kind of perspectives, where you need to play a much wider role and represent India on a global forum of thought, not just code. Um, Again, we are actually in an inflection point where we have 2.9 million requirements of analytics professionals by 2018. This is from a most popular site which I contribute and I commit to, which is the R bloggers. You would see 81% of DSA jobs are now DSA people who are owning or doing DBA or data platform jobs will be asked to at least hone one data science skill to make uh, their contributions more relevant in the digital era. So these are very um, on our face statistics which shows the kind of opportunities which are coming up in the era, and it's only our peril if we turn a blind eye to this and don't participate in this. And while you're starting to participate, the things will not be very rosy. It's not a clear stream of water where you can pedal through. It's like white water rafting. It'll be quite energetic. It'll try to consume you, but then that's the way revolutionists actually move ahead. That's the way the pioneers have set up this thing for us, and that's really the way where uncomfortable starts beginning to be second skin of yours, and you start honing this and moving this, failing faster and moving greater speed, and getting to this place where you start becoming absolutely relevant to your teams. Look at some more, talking about some more opportunities. Uh, Regularly, I'm on the panel to recruit the new talent. I do visit most of the technical, premier technical institutes, and look at some of the offerings, look at some of the opportunities which the students get. And I'm very fascinated with the enthusiasm and the interest the generation is getting to around AI and data science. A quick link, a quick query on Naukri gives me 50,146 roles which are still open around AI and machine learning. Um, uh, this is just about fascinating. We are technically in a area where we have more roles to offer. We need hands to help us, but we are eager to welcome the people who want to take the journey, and we are all the more with both the hands, want to participate in this revolution where we can help people grow their career, guide them, train them, use let them use our experience to get and move forward. There are many talks around robots getting us, um, uh, downsizing our workforces, or automation taking a toll on our jobs. In fact, it is actually true. The jobs which do not need thinking, which do not need creativity, which can be automated, will really uh, be the first candidates which go on to automation, and which will be the one of the few people who will be challenged to take up these tools. But look at the brighter side of this. If the mundane work has been taken care of, now you are left with more time to look at more creative ways of solving this problem. Can I come out with a second architecture of looking at the streaming problem? Can I look at one more algorithm which boosts my scores? Can I do an experiment with little more parameters around the XGBoost algorithm, which I'm talking about? So this lets you experiment more with more automation, and this makes it more relevant for business. That's the reason why your the RPA processes, the automation processes, will actually help you and reward you with a promotion than take somebody's careers in my perspective. So in this particular view of mine, I tried to portray some of the industry leaders who have been talking about. I intentionally didn't put my thoughts on this because I really want to collaborate on what the leaders are talking about. With my experience, something like the buyer farm to market supply chain deep learning algorithm, which we were working on, there's something which I want to collaborate from Andrew NG. We are doing quite exciting work around looking at detecting fake medication with deep learning, looking at harnessing these opportunities which are still in our research labs to go more and more and hire more and more people who can help us contribute to us on this particular direction, on any of these four perspectives of where we can look at helping and guiding them. The opportunities are immense. We are actually have roles, we actually have contracts to fill people, but essentially we are only waiting for people who show the enthusiasm to learn with us, to grow with us, and to go on this right whitewater rafting with us. And definitely we are here to take care of you, and definitely the opportunities are just about immense. So from here I would like to take a pause. I would be more relevant if I could answer some of the Q&As which are waiting for me. I'll actually go there, repeat the question for everybody's benefit, and take some of these questions and help you with your question and concern so that this session becomes more relevant to you. Uh, okay, the first question is, what does the algorithm predict wrong? What if the algorithm predicts wrong in some test cases, and won't it be harmful, suggesting the wrong chemical to the farmer? This actually goes through a deep learning algorithm, which is actually a 45 layers algorithm. This has an accuracy level of around 98 to 96%. So we are fairly confident that the recommendation that we are giving to the farmer is 98 to 96% accurate. Again, this is based upon a training set of 10 million such recommendations that we make. So we are very confident. And if you want to know more about this, definitely we could have an extended session as to how deep neural network work and why is that the data scientists are so gung-ho about their accuracy level and so confident about them. I'll take Akshay's question next. Can you please elaborate what machine learning algorithms that commonly used in the industry? Basically, we use a different. The major two classifications of machine learning algorithms are prediction ones and the classifiers ones. So in prediction, excuse me. So in prediction, we are basically looking at if you are looking at a Rolls-Royce engine, airplane engine, instead of having a fault occurring at 32,000 above the ground level one while the plane is flying, can we look at a machine learning algorithm which can predict me the fault of the machine with the sensor data much before the bird takes over the flies off from the runway. So this again helps me hedge the not just the economic loss around this particular thing, but also curtails my market loss, and my reputational loss is at stake. So we look at thousands of data points from the fuselage, from the Rolls-Royce engines, and we'll read these sensors, develop machine learning algorithm, and predict the probability of fault of a particular subcomponent. This is usually the prediction part of what we do. Then we also do something called as classifications, or we do a recommendation engine, where we basically look at, if I have 20 million uh, um, uh, users of my mobile phone as a brand A, how do I best put people on the correct cluster of usage of data and usage of calls, so that I can be relevant by proposing them a plan which makes more sense to them than throwing them offers and throwing them brochures on the newspapers and things like that. That was pretty much 1990s. And what we do with machine learning, AI, to correctly classify a customer and offer him a relevant plan is what we're talking in 2018. So this is in general the two broad classifications. We also have recommendation engines, boosted algorithms, which we can talk about later. But essentially, this is what we do in machine learning. I'll next take Bobby's question. He says, I am basically a metallurgist and having 8 years of work experience in aerospace sector. I've gone through the data science program for last 6 months, no programming experience. My question is, how do I get it? It's fantastic to know, Bobby, that you are taking interest in data science. As I was giving you an example of how domain knowledge is so very important to play in data science. I am working with uh, the, the ground staff, the engine staff of the Rolls-Royce, and we are looking at how do we exactly calibrate what is the fault probability of some of the subcomponents or subcomponents of an of a particular Rolls-Royce engine, which is taking a flight every three to 4 hours, right up to 34,000 feet in the height. So this becomes very, very important that people from domain, if they complement themselves with skills of data science, they become more coveted professionals who are more in demand for taking up this particular things. It's actually a plus which will work for in your career. Um, then there is an anonymous attendee, but I'll stick with the question. You said you're in the panel for hiring. What kind of skills you expect when you're hiring a person in AI? Very good question. We are looking for basically skills which show very good understanding of the basics, skills which show that the candidate is deeply interested to learn, contribute, and be guided in this particular industry. We are looking to him as a person who understands machine learning, very good with statistics, understand basic programming constructs, to like working in knows the various nuances of the Python and the R language to deal with vectors, vector algebra, advanced concepts in Python, working with pandas, working with scikit-learn. So these are the some of the things, very, very basic things which we are expecting to for the candidate to know. But more than that, we are eager to groom the candidate, provided he presents himself or herself with these basic skills and the aptitude to learn, unlearn, and have a voracious appetite for growth. This is the mindset and the technical skills combination that we are looking for each candidate to hire in our teams. I'll take the other question. I'm from supply chain industry. Can you tell me how to think AI to revolutionize? Lot many questions. If you really Google up the salesman problem, the salesman touring problem in Google, you will actually look at how do we look at optimizing the logistic functions. Um, Imagine yourself to be an Amazon and you have to deliver 10,000 parcels in a particular suburb region. How would you use your constraint? You have constraints of your resources, you have constraints of cost, you have constraints of delivery time. How do you put these constraints into an objective function where you spend the minimum amount to do this and also get 10,000 happy customers who are delighted to receive your product on time? So these are some of the logistics and the supply chain challenges which is opening up in the industry. And with the usage of TensorFlow, high level conducive hardware around these algorithms, it's getting easier for me to go on a simulations of these problems and get to a much better playing field, which was unthinkable in last 2 years. So this is a very good time for you to look at uh, harnessing these opportunities now and look at these things. I'm getting more and more questions I'm answering. So I'll just look at this. How do you see data science in the diamond industry? I have to be very frank. I have not worked with a jeweler as of now. The closest I've worked with the diamond industry is with the mining industry, where we looked at optimizing the costs, optimizing in cost of operations, um, things like that. But I will not be the best person to answer the diamond industry question. I will rather ask somebody else to take it up if they can. How long will AI deep learning be trending technologies? uh, they are just we are on just on the brink of this revolution. We are seeing speakers from on which we are shouting into commands and they are helping us with insights. 3 years back we didn't know that the cab which is going to drive us will also send some information about our profile, and the machine learning algorithm is actually going to rank a particular customer and score him, so that the next time he uses the cab hailing service, the proximity to the cab and his rate is actually determined by that machine learning. 2 to 3 years back we didn't even think of the scenarios, and now we are suddenly talking about the connected car and how we are getting into the highway, which is making it more safer. So the applications of AI and machine learning have just seemed to unfold, and they'll become more and more seamless as we go forward, and there is no getting back from here. If I have asked the question from Hirendra Kaushik. I am from the pharmaceutical industry, clinical research industry. How will AI? Some examples, if possible. Now, this is something very interesting we are doing. You might know very clearly that since you are from clinical research, 80% of the drugs which are supplied to sub-Saharan Africa are fake. uh, 20% of the drugs or medicines which we take in India are fake. So how do you look at such enormous gigantic problems and apply deep learning and AI into this and look at a win-win-win situation? Win for the corporation, because they're not just um, be relevant to the industry but are avoiding reputational loss. It's a win from the customer because he has some mechanism by which he can check the authenticity of the tablet while he purchases from the medical store. And it's a win for the distributor, because since you are capturing this particular image and running it through a deep learning algorithm for verification of a fake or not, you're actually sending out the lat long information around the image, and it is very easy for some quality inspector to visit the store which is actually uh, penting out this particular medicines. So there is a lot of research going around this. If you're really interested, I really have written a blog around detection of fake medicine through deep learning, and some of the initial work which I've done around web hosting this APIs to take such images. I'll be more than happy to help you with some of the links if needed, and you can go around these things. I'll quick. I think I'm moving out of time. I have I have just 4 minutes of time, so I'll take a few more questions and then possibly pass it on to Anuj for the next round. Most databases are huge. Our machine learning is not enough to process them. Run to learn. Can you suggest? So this is the reason why we use big data tools. We look at a server class statistic learning package called R server or PySpark or machine learning. Google Big Table. These are the tools which are the industry standard for looking at very large scale of data. These are distributed. These are fault tolerant by themselves, and these have triple nine SLAs, triple nine or sometimes 4.9 SLAs around their reliability and things like that. So that's essentially the way we actually put across a deploy production level solution for our clients. Mukul Singh says he works for Genpact as business analyst, but dashboards and Excel learning are know little bit of SAS. Expert in ML. I want to graduate in commerce. How do I move ahead? So you could move ahead by transforming yourself from being a business analyst of a common IT problems to look at business analysts roles around data science. Essentially data science too follows a process. It is called the team data science process at Microsoft. So basically what we do is we have a discipline of how do we look at the quality of data, how do we look at the variables of interest, how do we look at imputing of missing variables, how do we process outliers, how do we look at what is the fitment of machine learning algorithms. So you could be some person at as the conscious keeper or a quality gate inspector who could actually look at how do I really create a process which benchmarks these particular things. How do I ensure that I create a process which looks at really ingesting the data the way it is supposed to be and which is the industry best practice followed. So things like that are where we require analysts to come over, and where he or she complements the role of a data science developer or a modeler or a data scientist, and ensures that the checks and balances of the system of process that we are going through is actually in place to sorry, conduct these processes in the whole perspective. Some more questions. I think I'm running out of time, so one or two more questions, short ones. What is the best way to learn data science and machine learning? Many ways, but as I've been hearing, and my sense is that we see a quite a large dropout when it gets to a place where we are solely motivated to take this. I really find it very exciting in teams when I divide my learning teams into a group of 6 or 7. People collaborate among themselves to come out with the weekly assignment, the bi-weekly assignments that I give. Um, uh, I think a mixture of classroom and a mixture of virtual, plus a mixture of virtual groups, which effectively seems to be a good bet to start on with the learning around this. Great Lakes again hosts a fantastic combination of all these three, and really would appreciate if you can look at a hybrid model of learning, and then just to be a self-motivated learner around most of the things available. I think that also answers Vivek Gupta's question. Maybe I'll take the last question from here and then move on and give the control back to Anuj. Um, which websites do you follow for the latest updates in AI? Actually, I am poured into by a lot of websites. I follow the programming websites, basically the PyCon and the R bloggers for R. I follow the Apache website. I'm also do this. I also follow lot of data scientists. Kunal also being Kunal Jain among one of them whom I follow. So you need to follow. The recommendation is that you need to follow a lot of blogs, lot of data scientists. The leaderboards on the Analytics Vidya site are again a very good source of inspiration as well as technical ability, which I most of the time follow and gain knowledge, to get a different perspective of the same algorithm that I'm putting into place for my machine learning workloads. So a combination of blogs, data scientists, leaders, websites, and a portfolio approach to following this is a much better bet around these things. So I think I've already exhausted my time around this. I'm very happy with the enthusiasm you showed around my talk, and I'm very eager to share more around opportunities, more around grooming, but keeping in respect to the time and keeping a finger on the time, I would pass on this back to Anuj. Excuse me, so that he takes over, and then Harish lets us move from the last quadrant of this discussion to provide more value and enlighten us from his side of the stories. Anuj, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mrinal. Harish, am I audible? Harish, uh, I'll just, yeah. So thank you, Mr. Mrinal, for your insights. I hope that all the attendees have gained a lot of insight from your talk. Harish, your audio is turned off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this better? Can you hear me?
Right. So now it's over to you, Harish. Right?
Okay, fantastic. So let me just do a screen share.
Yes. Right.
All right. Can you guys see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes, Harish, I can see your screen.
Okay,
Mrinal,
perfect.
Mrinal here.
All right, perfect. So first of all, thank you, Mrinal. That was extremely helpful. That was extremely enlightening. Appreciate your taking the time on a Saturday to do this, and I'm sure all of the participants appreciate it as well. So let me give you a couple of my perspectives, right? So, so for everybody who's here, I think earlier on Anuj introduced me, but I have have been part of creating and taking to life all of our new data science related programs. We've been doing analytics related programs for quite a while, but it's largely been on the business analytics and business intelligence side, with an emphasis on things like the business applications, domain context, visualization tools, and so on and so forth. But over the last year and a half, we've increased the number of programs and the breadth of coverage significantly to include a program in big data and machine learning, which, going back to the Venn diagram, Mrinal, that you were showing, I guess big data was one of those. So we significantly increased the coverage on that side, and now have started a new program on AI and machine learning, which again closes the loop on a number of these topics, right? So what this means is that we've now got significant programs that cover every aspect of this. So regardless of which dimension of data science as a whole that you want to start to specialize in, I think there is always something here. But today I'm going to focus a lot more on the AI/ML program and the AI/ML side. But before we get into that, let's talk about how this is a great visual representation, what you see on the screen, of how I think about the AI world, right? Now this word has been thrown around for a really long time. In fact, when I did my master's way back, well over 15 years ago, it was in the Intelligent Robotics and Artificial Intelligence lab. This was at the University of Texas, and it was a very interesting time to be doing AI, because it was about the time Sebastian Thrun was starting out his work with with self-driving cars. I think at that point it was a very pie in the sky dream. Everybody was talking about 2025, 2050 as the targets by which self-driving cars would actually be even realistic. But now we're already talking about hitting the roads in 2019 and 2020. So I think things have come on leaps and bounds. It was also an era in around the turn of the millennium where you would actually get your master's thesis or your PhD thesis would actually be to design and build a fairly complicated neural network, right? And now it's a function call. So I think as Mrinal was saying earlier, one of the reasons we're even talking about this is because it's gone from research labs to being pervasive, right? It's gone from research labs to being function calls. I wouldn't quite say commodities, but simple and accessible enough that people are able to work on this without being career experts in this topic, right? The tool has started to recede, and the focus has instead become the the application or the building out of of what exactly we're trying to do here. All right, so with that context, let me actually tell you about how I think about the AI lifecycle, right? So if you think about what AI is, right, we're talking about a machine emulating what a human does. Right? We've always had computers. If you go and watch movies like Hidden Figures, you'll actually see that computers back in the 1950s were people. Right? There were people in a room who were given a problem. They had a series of algorithmic tasks to do. They went through the tasks, and at the end, they were able to generate a result. Then they started using some mechanical machines to help aid in that task, and eventually they started to get help from what we consider to be computers now, which are microprocessor based systems that help them through that task, right? So that is a computer, and that is a decision making system, right? Now humans have always had a certain sense of judgment. We take a lot of input. We take a lot of complicated input, whether it's visual, whether it's auditory, whether it's written, whatever form of information that we're getting from outside, right? We take all of that information and use all of that information to make some kind of a decision based on a set of parameters, based on a set of things that we're trying to optimize, right? Sometimes that is based on prior experience, and sometimes that's based on heuristics or things that we've heard and seen, right? And then we respond. So if you follow this direction, right, you'll see that the first two sectors, the computer vision, hearing, and the computer vision and hearing, is around the input. You're getting visual information, you're getting auditory information, you're getting written information, and you get all of that information, and then you have to start to process it, right? So the next layer is natural language understanding, translating what you've just heard, doing things like sentiment analysis and so on, which is all taking raw input, raw data, and putting it in a form that actually starts to make sense as you're moving into a decision making phase, right? And then the next blue and yellow quadrant you see there, it's all about decision making. Right now, the yellow part of it is case-based or expert-based systems, which means that I have an algorithm where I've defined every single parameter. So it's an if then, but imagine that a million times, and that's an expert system. But we've moved on from that and said that's too comprehensive, that takes too much time and effort, and that's quite inaccurate. We can do this with orders of magnitude more accuracy now that we have better computation power with machine learning. And so we've started to take all of this, vision, auditory, written, and all textual information, database information, and all of that, processed it, and made decisions on it. And finally, there's the response back to the real world, right? Now, one of the things I want to emphasize is AI and machine learning not being separate entities, right? Machine learning is a part of the grand vision of what AI can do. AI as an artificially intelligent system or an artificially intelligent agent can do, right? Obviously, when you're thinking about practical applications, because a lot of the sensory input, because a lot of the pre-processing and then eventually the response is handled by either a product that you build, whether it's a chatbot, whether it's a text-based app, whether it's an e-commerce site, because the product handles the input and the output, we largely focus most of our efforts, especially when it comes to business applications, on the machine learning layer. But that I just wanted to give you the whole picture, and that's how we think about AI. Now, somebody actually had a very interesting question, and I made a note of it. And this was a question I believe that was addressed to Mrinal, but I just wanted to take a moment to answer this. To the person who's from the diamond industry, I actually worked with De Beers a few years ago in South Africa, where they were building a CNN-based classifier. Right now, when they mine all of the ore from which they're going to get these diamonds, it goes through this giant sifter. If you just imagine like a giant sieve through which you send sand and rocks and all of that, but it's instead diamonds and ore and dirt and all of that debris. And there was a visual inspection, and that visual inspection used a neural network, a convolutional neural network, and it had to process it very, very quickly to sort what it considered to be ore and what it considered to be rock. And the reason they were doing that was this was the pre-processing step. This was still followed by, because the cost of error is really, really high here, it was still followed by manual intervention where somebody then went through the ore. But instead of somebody manually going through 200 tons of ore, they would then go through 10 tons of ore because the 190 tons of automated elimination was already done. So just I thought I would put it out there. It is being used, but I thought it was an interesting problem. All right. So I'm going to focus the rest of this time on actually the program in AI and ML that we've put together, how that pertains to hopefully helping you enter or succeed in this particular path. But in the process, I'll if you have questions, I'll also periodically stop to take some questions on, regardless of whether it's career, whether it's the program, whether it's how you should be approaching AI from a learning perspective. Right. So what is the postgraduate program in AI and machine learning at Great Lakes? It's an executive program, right? Which means it's explicitly designed for working professionals, which is how a lot of our blended learning programs are designed. And the reason these are designed for in such a way is that you have particular constraints, right? We cannot make an assumption that you're working, that you're studying and doing these problems 40 hours a day because you have day jobs. We cannot make assumptions that you will have 3 whole days to dedicate to a particular project because you have constraints around life, family, work, and so on and so forth. But it also means that you are coming in with some context about business problems, technology applications, products, and things like that. So we're not going to start from the very, very nitty-gritty basics, because we're hoping that you are looking at things in a functional way, and you're going to go back and use this every day at work. Right? It is also the difference between what would be a rigorous research-based kind of a master's program and something like this, which is very, very much a practitioner's program. Right? So the whole idea here is we assume you're a practitioner. We assume you aspire to continue to be a practitioner. And as Mrinal said, even if you're going to be a leader, you're not the kind of leader who sits around just allocating work to people without knowing what exactly the context is. Right? So that is the goal. So even if you are, and we have people with 24, 25 years of experience, we've had VPs of technology, VPs of business at companies who've come, whether it's media companies. In fact, in the big data and machine learning program, we've had people who, was a VP at HT Media, there was a VP at Goldman Sachs, and all of these people are there not because they're there to get this very high level understanding. They're there because they wanted to roll up their sleeves, get their hands dirty, actually build models, test models, feel the pain of what's going on, not because they'll be doing it every day. They do have teams doing it, but because they want to be able to effectively manage these people, they needed to build that skill as well. Right? So regardless of what level of experience and professional stature you're in, I think it always behooves you to be a little more hands-on. And that's the assumption we're making here. Right. What it also means that this is very much a blended format program. So it combines live interaction with tons of hands-on work. Hands-on work being the emphasis here, because ultimately when you do go back out to the workforce, very few people care what you claim to know. What really people care about is what can you do for them. Right. So what business problem can you solve? How are you going to solve it? What are the results you're going to show? And how is it going to benefit them? Right. And obviously everything that we do here, we've used tons and tons of the the experience in the background we have from our business analytics program, our big data and machine learning program, all of these other programs that we've built out, which have been highly successful, and we take all of the learnings. We believe in continuous learning ourselves as well, so we're constantly validating it. And finally, you do get an international certificate from Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. And the reason this is important is because we hold ourselves to a high standard, right? And if you have to succeed and get through this program and develop the skills necessary to go and become professionally successful, you have to hold yourselves to a high bar as well. Right? It's not enough to just get surface knowledge of a couple of topics. You have to have done things meaningfully. You need to have said, hey, I know how to build this product. I know how to build this model. I know how to test it. I know how to validate it. I know all of these things. And validation from external folks who are just as close, if not closer to where a lot of the action is, helps obviously keep us accountable, but also keep you accountable. And at the end, when you do go out and tell the world that, hey, I've done this and I've achieved this and I can now do all these things, people will take you seriously. Right? So that's the objective. Now, before I get into the next section, I see I think a series of things on the chat window. So I just wanted to see if there were a couple of questions there. All right, so there were a couple of questions that have come in. One is, can you please share the ideal path for learning ML and AI? All right, that is probably the hardest question, one of the hardest questions you can ask, right? I think there is no ideal path. I think Mrinal said it well, which is you need to go deep in one area, but you also need to go broad, right? I equate that to the T model of learning that was postulated many decades ago and made quite popular by Harvard Business Review, where you talk about going really, really broad across a various range of topics, especially as you go up to leadership roles. It becomes important to know the context. It becomes important to know things outside of your narrow view. So you go broad. Right? But you go broad to the extent that you are able to make decisions, you're able to interact with people, and you're able to communicate your requirements in a manner in which people are understand it. But then you need to go deep in something, right? Now, AI as a field is really, really broad, right? And just like the question you asked me is a lot like saying, how do I learn finance, right? It's really, really, really broad. You could be on the equity market side, you could be a trader, you could be on the risk side, you could be an insurance person, you could be in traditional banking, you could be in financial modeling and engineering. There are 100 different things you could do in finance, and in AI it's a lot like that, right? So the Venn diagram that Mrinal showed you is very indicative of that, where you have the visualization folks, you have business intelligence, you have business analytics with more traditional statistical models, you have machine learning models. As you'll learn through some of the topics I'm going to talk to you about in terms of the rest of the program, you also have things like intelligent agents. You also have machine-based interactive systems. There are a gazillion things you could be learning, right? So I think the more pertinent question is to say, what am I likely to be doing in the immediate future? If you are already kind of professionally predisposed, then you start to focus on that, and then you branch out and pick up all the adjacent areas. Or if you're completely new to the area, I think the best way to approach it is actually to say, what sounds cool and what would I like to be able to achieve, right? Would you like to be able to build a chatbot? Would you like to be able to build a simple product? Would you like to be able to make predictions on who's going to win the IPL this year, right? And pick a problem like that and then start to work backwards and say, what all do I need to know to this? Now, you may not be able to do it immediately because you'll realize that, hey, to do this, I need to be able to learn this. And then you'll poke around, you'll realize, hey, I can't understand this. So let me go back and understand the prerequisite for this. And there'll be a whole tree of prerequisites. And that defines how you should be learning something, right? But outside of the paths that I can prescribe to you about how we think about AI and ML and so on, I think even if you do that, I think having a concrete set of problems that you want to solve and then working backwards from that is probably one of the best approaches I can give you. And it's not just for ML and AI, it's basically for anything, especially in technology. And a second question was, I completed a data science program last year and actively looking for an opportunity on how to start my journey. No prior programming experience. So if you have completed a data science program, but you cannot build models, then I'm sorry to be kind of blunt, but then you haven't you don't really know data science, right? At the end of the day, you can know a lot of these things conceptually. I can explain neural networks on a board to a high school kid. I can teach you basically what reinforcement learning is in about 2 minutes, but that is a glimpse. That is kind of an intro. That's telling you what you don't know, right? Ultimately, if you are not able to build something, if you don't know programming, you have to learn it. Now, again, programming these days is a lot simpler than programming used to be. If you want to build an effective model in Python, for example, and which is actually a very intuitive programming language, and then you go out and start to use some of the tools that come pre-packaged with it, it's super easy. But you have to apply yourself and be able to commit to doing that, right? Otherwise, there is just absolutely no like I said, I think about it this way, right? It's like if you have never again, I'll go back to this finance analogy, right? If you've never actively managed money, either for yourself or for somebody else, I'm not going to trust you to run a mutual fund. I'm not going to trust you with a portfolio, right? You might have read all the academic books on it. You might be reading Economic Times every day, but I'm not going to trust you with my money. Right? Jobs in this space are exactly the same. In fact, people are trusting you with their data. People are trusting you to give them insights, and for you to earn the right to be able to be given that opportunity, I think you need to have developed a certain basic comfort with actually getting your hands dirty. Right? So the short answer there is you do have to get comfortable building out systems. So the next question was around what are the programming languages we're going to use in this AIML course. I'll get into that in a minute, but largely we're going to focus on Python. Again, there are a dozen different tools, a dozen different languages. We're going to take the ones that are most pertinent, that are most commonly used. But depending on the context, you will end up using 100 different tools. So I'd say we focus on being tool agnostic. Right. The idea is that let's say you join a company and that company uses, instead of TensorFlow, they use PyTorch. Right. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, I'm not going to take this job, or are you going to go and learn how to do the same thing on PyTorch? Right. And once you've learned the foundational principle of how something is done, you've built it in one platform, one language. It's actually relatively easy to move on to another language. Right. So similarly, if you've used one tool, the principles don't change when you move on to another tool. Some parameters might change, but that's largely how you're going to focus on that. So the short answer is mostly Python and associated packages and tools and so on. All right. So can you name some companies in India who are working on developing AI products? It'll help us understand which companies to aspire to in our growth. Now, look, I think I can give you a short answer to this, right? And the short answer is that building AI products these days is, so there are a few AI related companies, right, that explicitly focus on AI services and AI products, and every major company, TCS, Infosys, Cognizant, IBM, they all have consulting practices where they're helping companies build out their AI practices. But the longer answer is that Flipkart and Myntra have one of the most extensive data science teams in Bangalore at the moment, right? And nearly every major bank worth its salt is investing in getting data science teams built up. We have applicants, and if you look at the kind of split of the applicants who are coming into our programs, and you ask them why they're doing this, it's because there are data science teams, there are analytics teams being built out, and they want to move on and start working in these, right? So obviously the GEs of the world have always been doing AI for the last 15-20 years with industrial IoT and a whole range of other products. IBM's been building out its Watson platform for over a decade. Microsoft has been doing a whole lot of work on its cognitive computing side for quite a while, and has in fact, again, Mrinal is probably the better person to tell you, but from what I know, has bet its future on in this space. So obviously these big heavyweights are all doing this, right? But then every single bank is also investing in this. Every single I wouldn't say every small company is working in this area, but every company with a meaningful amount of data and a meaningful amount of interaction with customers and constraints around being able to do this at a very small scale is investing in this, right? So let's say you are a micro business with only, a few hundred or a few thousand customers and relatively limited scope of what you're trying to do. Maybe you're not quite investing in this, right? But the moment you get to a bank scale, or the moment you get to a large healthcare company, the moment you get to a really big retailer, especially on the e-commerce side, all of this starts to become immediately pertinent. So I would say if you actually looked at the telecom side, right? Jio has made huge investments in this space, which means that all the other telcos are not far behind. Every single major bank, HDFC started with investing in it, ICICI started investing in it, so every major bank is doing it. Every major international bank has committed to it. The big IT powerhouses are always around. And then you have the Flipkarts and all of these other I don't call them startups anymore because they're big and they're over 10 years old, but all of the kind of homegrown e-commerce, retail, consumer products, all of these companies which handle a lot of data and high volumes and velocity of data are also using a whole range of technologies in this space. So hopefully that elaborates that answer. All right, so I'm going to get back to telling you a little bit more about the program itself, right? So like I said, it's designed entirely for working professionals. So what does this mean, right? One is it's all about hands-on work. It's all about learning by doing, right? So we make an online lab available to you at appropriate times. You will be working on projects. You'll be working on assignments that you'll be building out all in an aim for you to practice. Right? The goal is you build a portfolio of projects so that you can go and show your employers what you can do. It's not necessarily about what you tell them, but it's all about what can you do. So, if you think about how you're going to hire, if you hire a wedding photographer, if you hire an interior designer, you're not going to just say, okay, you went to a good university, you took a good program, I'm going to hire you, right? You're going to ask them for proof of work. You're going to ask them for a portfolio. Technology professionals are facing the exact same thing these days. If you don't have a GitHub profile, I'd suggest you go build one. Right, and start to demonstrate all the projects you're working on. It could be trivial projects to start with, but that's how you build out a portfolio. So that's something we really emphasize, right? And this is where a large amount of the value from the program comes in. Right? So I often get asked this question about, how is this different from a lot of the online content and the online programs that are available? Look, I love online learning. I have done a lot of it myself. I think there is fantastic content out there, but the reason a lot of people come to this kind of an environment is one, for the peer learning, because you have a group of people you're learning with, you help each other, you're all working professionals. Quite often you hire each other, and that is a huge value. And the second thing is, despite having, let's say, a gym in your building, you probably go and hire a trainer if you can afford it. And the reason you do that is accountability, it's practice, it's pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone. How many times have we left an online course because we've reached an uncomfortable problem and we'll say we'll come back to it, right? And these are the things we're trying to avoid by forcing a structure, by forcing discipline of building out a portfolio of projects in this program. The second thing is the industry experts, right? So we have so our programs are taught, a significant portion of the program will be taught by industry practitioners, and then you have industry guests. You'll have capstone mentors who are capstone project mentors who are in the industry, and you have a lot to learn from these, right? So a second gripe that I get quite often is that, hey, I don't really know anybody in this industry. How do I start to network in this industry? How do I build a network? Well, here's a ready-made group of people, right? Everybody who's teaching you, everybody who's come to speak, and that's how you build your network, right? You go see who they know, you go see who they follow, read up on those people. That's how you bootstrap a network. And that's really, really important. And so that's something that we really focus on enabling as well. And finally, it's going back to being pertinent, being contemporary, right? Because let's remember, AI as a field has been around since the 1950s. Most of the techniques you're learning in machine learning, regression, Fisher, as a scientist, first looked at the iris data set, which is kind of the seminal data set. When you start learning some of the machine learning techniques way back in 1940s, right? Nearly every single technique we're talking about was developed sometime between the 1950s and 1980s. When Jeff Hinton, proposed the artificial neural network architecture, this was in the previous century. But it's about how is it being used. It's about what are the tools available. It's about what kind of problems are you solving now. It's about how quickly you can do it. It's about improving accuracy, and precision and recall and so on and so forth. So it's about focusing on what's pertinent today and what's coming up, right? So as much as this is an evolving field, things are going to keep changing. So you have to be tool agnostic. You have to say, okay, I'm not worried about what tool I'm learning. I need to learn the ground principles and then keep adapting, because 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, you're going to have a whole different set of tools. My guess is that everything that you are doing right now, you won't be doing 3 years from now. You will still be doing the same problems. You'll be solving them the same way, but you'll probably be using a whole different set of tools because there's things coming up every day. Right? So that's our focus is making sure you get those ground principles. All right. So quick run through of what you will learn in this program, right? So if you go back to that anti-clockwise wheel I was talking about, look, so everybody needs the foundations, right? Like I said, we use Python primarily, but you also need a certain sense of statistics, probability, some linear algebra that you'll use in some of these, and so on. And so between pre-work, some of the outside work that will prescribe to you to go do by yourself, and the foundational courses, you will hopefully have enough of a grounding so you won't be completely at sea when we start diving into the topics themselves, right? So that's the light blue box. The next two, I guess, intermediate blue boxes really focus on that machine learning part of that circle that I was talking about, right? So, supervised learning, unsupervised learning, how do you mix on some, various techniques to create ensemble techniques? How do you select the appropriate model? How do you drop certain features and keep some of the more relevant ones when it's a very high dimensional problem? And then some of the kind of emerging areas like reinforcement learning. Again, it's not something that's widely used at the moment, but if you go to speak to somebody in robotics or self-driving cars, they use reinforcement learning quite a bit. Right, so it will someday start to become pervasive, and it's good to know what's on the horizon. But really a huge amount of emphasis on making sure that you have the entire toolkit ready. Right, and then a significant amount of emphasis on, I guess, what is the the biggest phrase being thrown around in this whole space, which is deep learning, right, and neural networks. So a big emphasis on making sure that you understand how neural networks work, how multi-layer neural networks works, CNNs and RNNs as an extension, and their use, and all some of the more pervasive tools in this area, right? So how would you use TensorFlow? How does it and Keras, and how does Keras replace something that you would natively build in Python, and so on? And then we would get into a couple of so once you have that, now it's about how exactly do you start to apply these in some of the more popular, some of the most common use cases, right? So now machine learning, obviously, you could use it for recommender systems. You use them for a whole range of structured data problems. But increasingly, one of the things that deep learning has really enabled is computer vision to progress by leaps and bounds, right? So how does deep learning apply to image problems and vision problems, right? How do you do representations? How do you do segmentation, localization? All of this to aid and assist some of the the more what seems like straightforward problem solving using convolutional neural networks, right? So similarly, when we talk about natural language processing, right? So obviously you have the things that have been done for a really long time, which is statistical natural language processing, summarization measures, similarity measures, but you also start using techniques like recurrent neural networks and LSTM for sequence modeling. So you have a whole set of things that you could be doing around that as well. Right, and then finally you have problems which most people struggle with, especially when it comes to automated planning, when it comes to constraint satisfaction. These are all things where nobody has a clean, elegant solution, and so we end up using a whole range of heuristics where we use we use shortcuts, we use techniques to create these intelligent agents to emulate what we would be doing from a planning and constraint satisfaction world, which are some of the hardest problems you can think of when you think about getting machines to do what we do. Right, so it's a quick run through. Things will move around, things will change. Don't worry about the nitty gritty, but this is the foundational elements of how things work in this particular program. Right. I'll stop here again, taking a couple more questions because I see that some of them. Okay, so one is, okay, how to enroll in this program. I'll get to that in a minute, but basically the short answer is please go to greatlearning.in, find the AIML course page and apply there. And we'll give you all of the information. Even before applying, you can just ask for a brochure. You'll get all of the information. You can speak to the admissions team, and some of the counselors can walk you through that process. So another question was, I want to groom myself as an analytics professional coming from a commerce background with no maths at graduation level. How can Great Lakes help, and how can I kind of pick up some of the skills? Look, so there's no shortcut, really. Again, there is no prerequisite saying people need to have come from a certain background or certain graduation per se. But the reason we've applied some of those prerequisites is because you need to know certain things, or the way we would be teaching this program is that we would assume you know certain things. We would assume you're able to, you're comfortable writing, fairly straightforward programs. If you know Python, that's great, because we're not going to spend a whole lot of time just teaching Python per se. But it'll be great if you can think about, all of the prerequisites and how it pertains to you. Now, again, do you need to have a degree in mathematics? Do you need to have a degree in engineering? No, but those are all, to me, indicators and shortcuts that you have done a certain amount of math. Now, if you have a compelling case and you can tell me, hey, I've learned this on the side, I've taken this other course, I've kind of solved these couple of problems, I've read up on this, I know exactly how this thing works, and I know enough, and I believe that I can cope, sure, we might consider that, right? But the reason these prerequisites exist on our side is largely as a way of saying, as a way of demonstrating to you what we assume you know before you come into the program, right? Anybody obviously with none of this background can start, but it takes a longer time to get some of these prerequisites under your belt. And if you don't have all of the prerequisites, I'd advise that you actually spend a little bit of time getting some of those prerequisites under your belt before applying to the program for it to be most effective to you. Otherwise, you might be at sea, right? Okay, so the next one is, do we offer internships to students who are not opting for our program? I don't understand what that question means. Does that mean you want to work for us as an intern, or do you mean internships with companies? I didn't quite understand that question. So if you can clarify, I'll try to answer that question. All right, so again, a question around what is the most emphasized skill in data science? Honestly, I don't think there is one. I think, as Mrinal said, it largely comes from where you start. And look, so trying to make a big quantum leap from, let's say, being in one end of the spectrum to another end of the spectrum is really hard, right? So if you already do dashboards, get really, really good at visualization, especially in the context of machine learning models that are built, right? If you come from, solving business problems that largely pertain to making predictions, then start focusing on predictive algorithms, right? Classification and so on, and kind of become really, really good at that. And honestly, every one of these things has a space. So it's not like there is one thing that everybody's looking for. Right. All data science teams require a whole range of these skills. So I would suggest that you actually go through all of them. Okay, so somebody asked, okay, so I guess the clarifying answer somebody gave me was, okay, so the internships was with companies. So we don't arrange internships at all in this program. Like I said, 100% of people who do our programs tend to be working professionals who don't have the ability or the time to do internships. Quite often they work on capstone projects that pertain to either something that they're trying to develop, something that they're trying to solve for a company, for maybe their own company or another one. And we support all of that through mentorship and helping them through the process. But there's no internship component with this program. Okay, and then okay, and then the next question was, I have exposure to Oracle, PL, SQL, and integration tools like SIS. So I don't. Is that a part 2 to another question? I don't know, but look, if you understand data, it always helps. Oh, okay, so the next part was thinking about moving to data science. Can you suggest me how to prepare? Like I said, right, I think the most logical place to say is looking for adjacent steps, right? It's like, think about crossing a river and there are already rocks there, and if you try to make a giant leap across the river, it's going to be hard. But if you're already on one of the rocks, taking a step to another rock is feasible. That's how I think about making large transitions. And so when you're thinking about a giant transition from, let's say, something that where you've largely been focused on, PL, SQL, and managing and retrieving tables, to suddenly saying, hey, I'm going to be an expert modeler. They're very different skills, right? But guess what? Data science teams also require data engineers. So perhaps, becoming much more expansive in your knowledge of understanding data management from a big data perspective, picking up some of the big data skills. These are all things that start to make a lot of sense, because these are all adjacent areas, right? Then you can start to think about how do you integrate relational and non-relational data, right? Structured and unstructured data, and so on and so forth. And those start to make very quickly you'll reach a point where, okay, now I've already understood this. I know how to handle big data. What do I actually do with this? And then you understand the modeling part and so on. Now, if you wanted to say, hey, like I'm tired of this, I'm bored of this, I want to go learn this other thing, perfectly fine, right? I think that I respect that. I think that's also a great jump to make, but you just have to be mentally prepared that that's going to take longer. It's going to practically be harder to convince an employer that this path makes sense, and for them to trust that what you're talking about until you've built a couple of years of professional experience and built a portfolio, right? Okay, and then quick question was, somebody asked how many projects can I get my hands on? So I guess since we're on the projects part, I'll pause there with the questions, and I'll get back to this particular slide. So yeah, we focus on projects, right? A lot of learning by doing. We'll have a series of projects. Some of them will be realistic but fairly standard that you would have seen. Some of them will start to push you beyond the obvious, right? And for example, a project on visualizing historical art sales, right? And that's something where most people don't spend a whole lot of time creating interesting visualizations and thinking about visual representation of information. I think that's really, really important, as Mrinal was saying. Regardless of what your analysis is, if you can't tell a compelling story, may or may not matter at all. But you will, at the end of the day, build this portfolio, right? So this little snippet you see on the right is all about building a portfolio of the kinds of things you'll be working on. Like that's what your ultimate portfolio should look like. Obviously, that's not relevant to this particular program. It's just a snapshot, but that's what your portfolio should look like. Like, what are the projects? What have I used for it? How did I solve it? And think about it this way, right? You go into an interview, these are the things that people will focus on, right? I always end up asking people what they've worked on, what are the challenges they faced, how did they overcome those challenges, what would they do differently, and so on and so forth. And focusing on the kind of stuff you've already done makes it a lot more pertinent, right? Otherwise, how are they going to evaluate you? They're going to evaluate you either through kind of a series of completely unrelated problems, or they're going to ask you a bunch of hypothetical questions, neither of which are as tangible for you as well as for them in terms of their understanding of how you can perform at the job, right? So having a portfolio helps, and that's what we focus on. To the longer, and then the short answer to your question is, you'll be doing a series of about 8 or 9 projects, if I'm not mistaken, including the capstone, and roughly one for every significant block of the program. And then the capstone kind of integrates a number of your skills, right? So it'll integrate maybe your ability to work on neural networks, which obviously relies on your ability to build a classifier and then visualize that information and tell a compelling story at the end of it, right? And that is largely a kind of an end-to-end data science project that we'll be working on at work. Like I said, so a lot of the prerequisites we have here are with the intention that we assume you have these prerequisites, So our faculty are the folks who are teaching are going to assume that you have some professional experience. So when they talk about business problems, when they talk about technical problems, you understand how things work. We assume you have a familiarity with basic statistics, linear algebra, and probability. If you don't have that, we'll provide some pre-works for you to get up to speed, but it'll be stuff that you will have to do outside of the program, because again, there's a limited amount of time. We're going to focus our energy on getting you from getting you up to speed and functional. If we spend a whole lot of time giving you the really ground prerequisites, that takes up a lot of the time, which is not ideal for you guys. Right? So that's why we focus on building it out that way. And we do require that you have some functional programming experience. Now, ideally Python, but if you don't, sure, you can learn it. It's easy enough. But if you understand how simple code is written and how you build out models and so on, that helps. So that's where we start from. Right. And finally, some of you asked about career success. Look, so the short answer is there is no such thing as placement for mid-career people, right? That's a very fresher kind of a concept. People get placed, companies come and pick like 20, 30 people. They're not hiring you based on what you can do. They're hiring you based on potential. They pay you kind of an entry-level salary, and they're taking a risk. And from some of the larger companies, I know a lot of that risk also factors in the fact that, maybe 50% of these people will actually work out. Bake that into the model and say, okay, that's how I'm going to hire. Mid-career professionals are different. Each of you has a different background. Each of you has a different context. Each of you has a different interest. You obviously come at a higher price point, and most companies expect that you're functionally ready tomorrow. Right. So obviously roles have to be very tightly integrated to what you already know and what you would like to be doing. And even so, it tends to be, there's no recruiting season, right? So at mid-career levels, most jobs tend to come up as and when they're needed, and people hire you. So our job is not to focus on a recruiting season or a month of hiring or anything like that. We help build all of your skills so that whenever it happens for you, you're ready. Right? So we run career development workshops. You will meet with the industry experts who will talk about very pertinent aspects of how things are done in their context and what are the do's and don'ts from your perspective. You'll obviously build a fairly extensive peer network, which I'd emphasize, this is probably the least appreciated, but probably one of the most powerful things that will happen through this program. We've seen time and time again that in every class, about 10% of people end up going and working for their classmates, right? Not necessarily directly reporting to them, but working in their companies, because some people come in and say, hey, I'm coming because there are these huge opportunities within my own company, and I want to get one of these roles. But then obviously you work with somebody day and night on a capstone project or another group project, and you get really close to them. You start to appreciate, strengths, weaknesses. You build a rapport, you build a bond, and people start to do that, right? People refer you to their companies, people refer you to other openings they know. So there's a huge amount of peer-to-peer work that happens, and I really urge that if you were going ahead with this program, please use that opportunity. Right, access to lateral opportunities is another big one. Right, so you have a huge amount of focus on like we have a lot of partner companies. They all make their openings available to us whenever it comes up. We typically screen them for suitability for particular programs and only make it available to you if we think they are looking for the kind of skills that you are developing, and so that there's a likely fit. And once that happens, that's another huge avenue that people use. So that's it from me. I'm going to take a few more questions. For the two people who asked a question about how exactly you apply, I would suggest you see the URL at the bottom. Please go there and ask for a brochure if you want to get more information, and then possibly apply there as well, or reach out through either the phone number or the email ID given there. So I'm going to leave this up on the screen for a while I answer some of the last questions. All right, so somebody asked about, for people with a non-computer science background with less work experience in MLAI, how should we prepare for landing a job? I think that's a very long answer. In fact, Analytics Vidya, itself has some fantastic, exposition on this particular topic. So I'd actually urge you to spend a little bit of time going through kind of how other people have approached it, what people have said, how different companies have approached asking these questions. But typically, look, from what I've seen over a dozen, dozens of companies, everybody wants to know three things, right? They want to know that you have the baseline kind of intellectual rigor and horsepower, right? Which means some of them will ask you puzzles, some of them might ask you to, ask a challenging intellectual question, not necessarily, but that's just a test of, is this person intellectually rigorous and do they have the kind of basic abilities in that direction. The second thing they test for quite often is your understanding of how business problems are solved, right? So these could be case studies where you actually have to go through fairly straightforward and simple analysis. Even framing a problem, for example, would be tested. So again, before you get into a modeling kind of a machine learning modeling kind of a problem, the very first step is understanding what somebody wants to solve and translating somebody's pain point to what is a data science problem, right? So quite often that gets evaluated. And then the third thing they would test you on is actually probing you on the kinds of projects you worked on. Even if they're simple, unsophisticated problems, you will get probed on how you did it, what went right, what went wrong, how would you actually go about doing things differently, what are alternative areas, and so on. But this is an aggregate across a whole different range of companies that I've seen. But if Mrinal, if you'd like to jump in and if you have thoughts on these, I would love your opinion as well.
Sure, Harish. Actually, while you were answering, I completely agree with you. The field itself opens up quite different avenues. For example, I have seen project managers coming from traditional IT background and who are now project managers for DI and ML. That comes from an inherent understanding of DI and ML, and going forward, they understand how to take requirements, what are the data check pain points, data access, data encryption. So they have those they learn those expertise, and then they move on to project management in a data science purview. We also have business analysts who come in from a traditional background, who come into the data science background, who are now our data source experts, data quality experts, data process experts, and things like that. Just to complement Harish thing, and there are for you need not necessarily turn up as a machine learning expert the day you step into a course from great learning. The what you can look to is what is your strong point. For example, if you're very good with art, we really need people who have understanding of color, texture, context to do our visual dashboards. We lament ourselves as people who spend more times on vector algebra than on color. For me, a magenta and a pink doesn't give any much difference, but we really require those people who can actually come and say the hue of the color actually makes profitability difference in our visualizations. So even if you are with an art background, or even if you're with a project management background or a business analyst background, this area is open for you to do a quality work. And not necessarily everybody who needs to get into this area needs to do a PhD in algebra and has to have those prerequisite skills to make a bang in this area. Just to complement Harish's answer on that.
Thank you, Mrinal. All right, so I just noticed that we're way over time, and I know both of us have tried our best to answer a lot of your questions. If you still have any unanswered questions, I urge you to please reach out, to the team that I've left up on screen, and we'll try our best to get your questions answered. But from my end, I want to take this opportunity. First of all, thank you to everybody who's taken the time to attend this session, and I hope this was helpful. And thank you also to Mrinal for enlightening us on from kind of a practitioner's perspective.
Thank you, Harish, and thank you to all the people who have spent time over here to take a deep look at this option. And all the best for your careers.
Thank you. Over to you, Anuj.